So it's been another eventful week at the state capture inquiry. The Commission has heard testimony related to governance issues at Denel and how the arms manufacturer was almost run into the ground and left bankrupt. The inquiry also honed in on operations at EOH, hearing damning evidence against Deputy State Security Minister Zizi Kodwa and Joburg Mayor Jeff Makubo. Transnet's former treasurer also slid between bouts of amnesia while reserving his right to remain silent during Regiments capital-related testimony. Our reporter, Dumalo Mhlaude, has been watching all of the developments. Very entertaining. He joins us now to take stock of the week gone by and to look forward to today's testimony. Really, it's sort of great content for any writer of any movie script, but sadly in South Africa, it's our reality. Let's begin with what we learned this week, Dumalo, about what might have happened at Denel. Stephen Berger, former CEO, taking the stand, making really important concessions.
Absolutely, Ayanda. And, Stephen Berger was the guy who was identified by other witnesses as someone who effectively bullied and pushed them out of Denel. This was at a period when, of course, Denel was getting into deals with VR Laser. VR Laser is a company that's linked to the Guptas. And of course, it has at its center of operations a certain Mr. Salim Essa. We've heard his name come up very regularly at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. And he made certain concessions saying that looking back, after being pushed very aggressively, because one must also state that initially in his testimony, he had stated that he felt that the deals that they got into VR Laser for the acquisition of hulls. Hulls are basically the armored in belly of military vehicles that protect the soldiers. And these hulls and the acquisition thereof, in terms of VR Laser's involvement, he felt that VR Laser at the time was going to add value. When asked why he didn't take advice from other executives who had flagged VR Laser because of reports that were coming out linking it to the Guptas, he said that at the time he felt it was value add and that VR Laser was a company that could deliver on its mandate. But then he turned around and admitted that he could have done things differently and effectively apologized and saying that, when he was doing it in good faith. He didn't seem that he wanted to bully anyone out or push anyone out of the company. And in hindsight, he could have and should have done things differently.
All right. If you missed that part of the testimony, let's remind you very quickly. Take a listen.
Looking back, it's a mess. The place is bankrupt and they're not producing any hulls. So obviously, I wish I could turn back the clock and say, let's try and do it in a different way. For sure I would have done that. The one thing I would want to say, however, is the reason why this is in a mess is for whatever the reasons, whatever their association by their owners, they could not have a bank account and they are bankrupt as a result of that. So too is LMT bankrupt today, not because, or in business rescue, not because we did not place a whole contract on them, but because they could not execute their orders. So whatever decision I would have taken at the time, be it VR Laser or LMT, I would sit today and say, I am sorry that I took that decision. It would have been the wrong decision because both instances would not have been able to produce the hulls.
All right, so Dumalo, another aspect of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry that took over headlines was the EOH-related testimony.
Absolutely.
Yesterday, we heard from a former Transnet executive, Petolo Ramasibudi, who was actually implicated in receiving all kinds of payments from EOH.
Yes, he was. And in terms of EOH's involvement as well, he had to explain how these illicit payments went through and how in his time as a group treasurer, the man in charge of the purse strings, he wouldn't have flagged certain transactions because, they were dealing with companies here at the time that when they went into business with them, according to the PFMA, which is the legislation that governs how transactions go between state entities, even in the private sector with companies have to meet certain benchmarks One of those would be including having an active account that shows that they have been functional, that shows that they have good financial management. But, you know, when these decisions were taken, monies were transferred through to companies that weren't necessarily financially up to standard when it comes to the PFMA. And some of these companies weren't even in existence for long, had less than 100 Rand. Wow. We've heard in their bank account, which is quite shocking. But let's listen to what the former Transnet Group Treasurer, Petula Ramusibudi, had to say, and how he didn't give an account of what happened.
Sure.
Can you point me to a single other person at AXA who would know that Regiments were paid 22 million by Standard and that AXA was paying that back on the swap to Standard?
Through yourself, Chairperson, I don't remember who were in the AXA at the time, so I can't pinpoint anybody.
Do you recall a payment from Regiments Capital to Risk Stats Consulting on 2 March 2010?
With your permission, Chairperson, may I not respond to this one in case I incriminate myself?
All right, so Dumela, let's stay with EOH. And it's an important company because this is, if you like, the institution that we heard had actually been paying monies to top government officials, many of them in the ANC.
Absolutely.
And those revelations actually been brought forward by Stephen Powell.
Yes, and how Stephen Powell fits in is that he's a forensic specialist. So in his scope of responsibility, he's the man that tracks the money payments. He's the guy that follows the breadcrumbs, if we can speak that way. And what he uncovered in his testimony was the fact that there were several payments that were made by EOH through various, if we can call them, emissaries or emissary companies,
right.
Not directly to those who are implicated, Jeff Makubo being one of them, but to companies linked to Jeff Makubo and to companies that would then siphon the money off and redirect it either to the ANC or to shelf companies belonging to Jeff Makubo. So you have money moving from company to company to company, and then eventually finding its way either to those close to Jeff Makubo or to entities that he would be listed as a director in. And so let's listen to what Stephen Powell had to say about what he uncovered.
Can I take you down the list of the cost of sales to 6 from the last cost of sale, and can you see what the chair? Can you tell the chair what you see there?
Certainly, Chair. I see a payment reflected under August 14 of 70,000.
And the line item description in relation to it?
ANC.
Can you read the full line item description, because I think it's important.
Cost of sales, ANC.
So the payment by Mfundi to ANC is treated as a cost of sales by Mfundi.
That is correct, Chair.
Indeed. Then I want to take you to the next cost of sale to Mfundi. Can you identify that for the chair?
The next narration is cost of sales, Mololwane Consulting, 80,000. And then that is
the
also...
one just immediately below the one you have just read of cost of sales ANC.
Correct, Chair. And that appears in the August 14 column, and that is taken through to the total and the main total column as well.
And can you just remind the chair who are the members of Mololwane Consulting?
Certainly, that is Florence Makubedu, and Jeff Makubo was a member active until 2019.
All right, and that leads us to what we're likely to see today. So a name that came out there, Jeff Makubo, currently the mayor in Johannesburg, but was an MMC for finance at the time of allegedly receiving these payments.
Yes.
What are the pressing questions he needs to answer today?
The pressing questions he needs to answer today is that, according to the testimony that came out from Mr. Powell, was that these payments that came through, he was treasurer of the ANC at the time, and he would likely argue that these payments didn't come to him personally. They were then used for party events, including commemorative events, and to pay for buses and other services that would be linked with such. However, when the forensic money tracers went and looked at what happened, the big ask is, these services were never actually rendered according to what happened, because this money was supposed to go to service providers but never actually reached their pockets. It ended at these shelf companies, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of rands. The money that went through to the ANC, however, is a different story. I did try to get a comment from Zizi Koda, who's also implicated. I sent through a message, and as of yet, he has not responded. But I am sure that at some point, of course, hopefully he will be able to give us a response. So this is what was at the crux of the matter. These payments that were made through, and some of these invoices, written as service, as transport, but when you look at the companies that are supposed to have been paid, they never would get paid. They never got paid, including bus service providers. So the money ended at these shelf companies that are linked to Mr. Makubo. So he'll have to answer exactly how this happened at a time when, of course, in the city of Joburg as well, when he was the man behind the purse strings, how Microsoft, after a while, eventually pulled out its license from EOH because it's felt that its brand was being compromised by being involved, because it was being asked essentially to also make advance payments. And some of these payments, when it reflected back on the accounting books, showed that no services or no value add was actually received. That's what led to the crisis. When it pulled its plug on EOH, the company then, of course, sank, dived. And what happens when that happens? It's people, the workers, the ordinary men and women who lost their jobs. Thousands and thousands of people were laid off, and Stephen Berger, of course, alleged to that as well.
Sure. So as it is becoming a norm, dare I say, when there's a top ANC official who has to take any form of accountability, either in court or the State Capital Commission of Inquiry, there's circulation now of a possible march in support of Jeff Makubo. What do we know about that?
Yes, we are receiving information and some media alerts from groupings that are purportedly linked to the regional ANC, and they're saying that they're hands off Jeff Makubo, and they are coming to show support. Again, the narrative being pushed there is that this is nothing more than a politically motivated attempt to try and discredit him, and it's not necessarily that he has anything to answer to, but the drive to have him being held to account is actually politically motivated and not anything to do with any wrongdoing. However, when you listen to the testimony and you see a forensic expert who's traced monies and who's traced the activities, that's a lot to answer to when you look at the fact that you're trying to pin it through a conspiracy. So, of course, we'll expect officials from the SAPS and the Johannesburg Metro Police to be out in full force. If these marchers have applied for their permit to march and, observing COVID-19 restrictions, we expect that they will be just, there to make their voices heard, and we don't expect any undue behavior, but certainly law enforcement officials will be there as well.
All right, and we'll be there with you all the step of the ways as well. Dubalo Vahlaudi, our reporter, watching closely the situation unfolding at the State Capital Commission of Inquiry. Plenty moving parts. Will help you connect the dots throughout the course of the day. Thanks very much indeed.